Hello, and thank you for joining the Canyon Professional Development with Grand Canyon University. My name is Dr. Rebecca Dyer, and I'm a full professor in the College of Education at Grand Canyon. In this session, we will be covering special education law. Our objectives will be to review the components of IDEA, learn the steps of the special education process, and to review the Americans with Disabilities Act. We'll start with a short video that will summarize the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which we will refer to as IDEA.
Have you ever had the experience of being the only person in a classroom who had trouble doing something or understanding a certain concept? How would you feel if every day in school you faced the same kind of difficulty, while everyone else seemed to find the work easier than you? What kind of support and teaching would you need to keep trying? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is a law that was passed to help and support students who face this situation every day. The current version of the law was passed in 2004, but it's based on a law that was first created in 1975, known as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. It revolutionized the education of children with disabilities, which, in 2001, was more than 6 million children. The IDEA requires that public schools provide specialized services to all children with disabilities from birth to age 21 for the purpose of granting equal access to education. A specific part of the law mandates public schools to create an Individualized Education Program, or IEP, for each student who is found to have an eligible disability. An IEP is a document that is drawn up and agreed upon by teachers, parents, specialists, and, if possible, the student. The document describes the present achievement level of the student, then specifies goals for the school year, as well as any special support needed to achieve those goals. In other lessons, we'll discuss learning disabilities in more depth and how to use an IEP in the classroom. The focus of this lesson is the law itself. Let's visit Cornerstone Elementary to see an example of the IDEA in action. Meet Susie. Susie is a bright, energetic third grader who loves school. Susie has a hearing impairment. She's not deaf, but her hearing is poor enough that it affects her educational performance, as she has trouble hearing any of her teachers. Susie would qualify for special assistance under the IDEA. Her IEP would include information about her hearing impairment, such as the most recent hearing test results, and would also outline multiple goals and services agreed upon by her parents and teachers. Although Susie might meet with a specialist once or twice a week, most of her time would still be spent in the classroom with all of her fellow students. This is because another aspect of the IDEA is the requirement that a student with a disability be educated in the least restrictive environment possible, or LRE. In other words, a student like Susie who has a disability should have the opportunity to be educated with her non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. Susie should have the opportunity to interact with her peers and have the same access to educational experiences as everyone else. Susie may just need additional resources, such as visual aids, to optimize her learning. Individualized education programs and least restrictive environment are the two most well-known principles of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Okay, so we got a brief overview of some of the components of IDEA and a summary of how it impacts students with disabilities. Now we're going to look in a little more detail into the 6 specific components of IDEA. The first is called free and appropriate public education, and sometimes we call it FAPE for short. So let's break down the words of this component. So free means that every child with a disability who is eligible for special education must be provided those educational services at no cost to the parent. The services that are provided must be appropriate for the individual student, which means they need to be unique to each child. The IEP team will determine what is appropriate for each student based on data. Then we have the word public. This refers to the fact that the public school system must educate all students. This includes all students and all costs that are associated with providing an appropriate education. And then education refers to special education, general education, and related services. Some examples of related services are speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, or counseling. An additional piece of this component is called Child Find. And this is the steps that schools must take to find children who may have a disability and evaluate them. So this mostly refers to students who are not yet enrolled in school for kindergarten, so they're younger, and school districts need to reach out to those families in the community and offer free testing if there's a suspected disability. The second component of IDEA is the Individualized Education Plan, which is referred to as the IEP. The term IEP can refer to the document. It can also refer to the meeting. And there's also something called an IEP team. There's required members for every IEP meeting, and this includes a parent or guardian, special education teacher, the general education teacher, a person to interpret data, which is usually the school psychologist, and the local education agency representative, which is going to typically be the principal. The IEP document is a plan very specific to the student that outlines how they will be supported due to their disability. This document must be updated every year, but can also be updated more often if needed. The next component is least restrictive environment, or LRE. This is the placement or setting type of classroom in which a student will be placed. A child's eligibility category should not determine their placement. The law IDEA makes it very clear that children with disabilities are to be with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. Let's look at some examples of different environments that we find in schools. We have the general education class or inclusion. We have the resource classroom, which is where the students are pulled out to a separate classroom. We have self-contained, which is a classroom that only includes students with disabilities. And then we might have separate schools or residential facilities. So the very least restrictive environment would be that inclusive classroom. And then we have the most restrictive environment, which would be residential. The fourth component of IDEA is parent and student participation in decision making. Parents have the right to participate in all of the meetings concerning their child's special education, and they must receive notification of these meetings in a timely manner. If they're not able to attend a meeting, they have the right to request that it be rescheduled. They also have the right to withhold consent prior to any evaluations being conducted with their child. IDEA wants parents to be full, equal participants in all aspects of their child's special education program. And also, when it's appropriate, we want the student to be a member of the IEP team. And as we start preparing for their transition plan, we are mandated to at least invite them to the IEP meeting as well. Next, we have procedural safeguards. These are an outline of the parent's rights according to IDEA. So they must receive prior written notice regarding the identification, evaluation, or placement of their child. They also have the right to inspect or review their child's educational records. If needed, they can request mediation and a due process hearing. They can also request an independent educational evaluation. Again, this section emphasizes that parents participate in all decisions regarding their child's education. The school must provide parents with a copy of the procedural safeguards at least once a year. The final component of IDEA is appropriate evaluation. Students with disabilities must be reevaluated every 3 years. We must remember that no single test can be used to make an eligibility determination. No single person makes the eligibility decision for a student, and all decisions are team decisions. Next, let's look at specially designed instruction. So according to IDEA, special education is designed as specially designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of the child. The needs of an eligible child met through adapting the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. So the instruction should address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability. And we must ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards that apply to all students. Special education eligibility. So a child must have all of the following to qualify for special education: Number one, a condition that meets the data definition of a disability, and these are mandated by IDEA. Number two, the condition must adversely affect their access to the general education curriculum. And number three, they must have a need for special education and or related services in order to progress in the general curriculum. IDEA has outlined specific disability categories that we must consider when we're determining eligibility. And there's a specific criteria outlined for each one. So as we go through the special education process, we must review the student's data to determine if they qualify as having one of these disability categories. Let's review the special education process. So it starts with the referral. This can be made by the teacher that's working with the student. It can also be determined that a referral is submitted by the parents if they are noticing concerns as well. Then we're going to review the existing data. We're going to come together as a team and look at what we already know about the student, and that will typically lead to us collecting additional data. We want to have as much information as possible before we make this decision. Then we're going to have a results meeting. That's where we would now review all the new data and existing data to now make a decision. That's when we determine eligibility. We are going to, as a team, look at the data, look at the criteria for each of the disability categories, and determine if the student does indeed qualify under one of those disability categories. And then we get to develop the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, so that we can outline how we're now going to support the student. It's very important to consider the timelines that are outlined by IDEA for this process. So we have 60 days from the referral to when we have that determination of eligibility, that meeting. And then once we do determine eligibility, we have 30 days to write the IEP. It's very important that these timelines be followed so that everything we're doing is in compliance with IDEA. Let's look at some reminders with this process. One is that parents can request an evaluation or a reevaluation. If they do request that, the school has 15 days to respond to that request. We also want to remember that the child must be evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. And finally, parents are equal members of all decision-making teams in special education, and they need to have equal input. There's another law that impacts students sometimes with disabilities that we need to consider as well, and that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 are major federal legislative acts that are designed to protect the civil rights of individuals with disabilities. And we want to consider how this comes into play in schools, and that's with the 504 plan. So the 504 plan can provide accommodations to students who need supports but do not have a disability under IDEA. Some examples of these needs might be a temporary injury, ADD or ADHD, or diabetes. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act offers numerous benefits to students with disabilities and their families. So this is just kind of a summary of how IDEA supports our students with disabilities. First, by ensuring free and appropriate public education for all eligible students. IDEA promotes inclusive learning environments, tailored educational plans, and individualized support services. In addition, IDEA empowers parents to actively participate in the educational decision-making process through the development of the IEP. This legislation not only guarantees access to specialized instruction and related services, but also fosters a sense of belonging, acceptance, and equality among students with disabilities in the school community. And finally, IDEA supports students by addressing diverse learning needs, promoting early intervention, and emphasizing the importance of transition planning. IDEA sets the foundation for a brighter future for students with disabilities, enhancing their academic, social, and emotional development throughout their educational journey and beyond. So now that you've thought about and reviewed the components of IDEA, take a moment to think about 3 things that you've learned from this session, 2 questions that you still might have, and 1 thing that you enjoyed during this session. We have a reference here with more information about the law IDEA. And I want to thank you for taking time to view this session.